Okay, let's finish this off. It's looking a bit boring, and this is looking pretty fat and dirty. I think I'll just take a centimetre off at the bottom and just flip that in, and that should change the character a bit. Just bring this up a little. Whatever. I hate derbies. Alright, so you want the heel counter to actually be short of the underlay allowance. When I say short, I mean if you're clever, you can use this area to catch the heel counter in a way that will be very efficient, because the workers just have to wedge it in there and it'll sit there. So that's something you do underneath in the lasting allowance, but you sort of want to plan for it up here. And just by having a little bit less than a standard seam underlay, so the seam underlay would come about here, and that's the seam underlay for the vamp. So the vamp would finish here and go under here, and these would come a little closer, and the heel counter can just poke in that little restriction in a really efficient way. And if we're going to make a one-piece vamp, I can actually show you what's going to happen with the vamp. The vamp is going to have a nice round cut here, so that we avoid any point forces being concentrated in this area. It will also allow us to get the skiver in there. And then the tongue's one of those things that you're going to probably have to adjust at the end, so just hint to it. And here we can get the width, so we want it to be very much past the eyelets, so let's just whack it in like this and just bring that up like that, and that's what your tongue is going to be doing, right? And of course that's a bit cheap, so if you want to spend a bit more money, you might want to make your tongue a separate piece, and that actually makes things easier for patterns, because you've got to calculate all this in one piece if you have a one-piece vamp and tongue. But if you cut the tongue off, you can angle the vamp a little bit differently and have the tongue angle a little bit differently, so that it takes on this shape in the upper before you've even started lasting. All right, now let's put some sponge in the top line. And for a shoe like this, you'd just have a stitch just above the counter. Again, by having the stitch just above the heel counter, that stitch will act as a guide on where the heel counter should go. I.e., it'll only go one way, and if you push it in nice and tight, it'll fall into position, which is really great when you've got to make 1,000 of these blasted things. All right, and then from the top, we'll just bring a nice sporty sort of swoop. Not a Nike swoop. This is just a stitch, and this is going to be a puffy sponge bit like you see on school shoes. All right, like you see on a typical derby. And I just want to make this look a little bit better by angling this back a little bit, swooping that back a little bit. It was a bit aggressive there, you know. And alright, that's really about it. You know, you can clean it up with rubber, but I don't. I do actually. It's probably more efficient to just hack this down, because in the next step is where we're really going to have some funky fun. So that's kind of more what we see. And then can actually produce the form, the first thing you want to do is cut the center lines. This is going to be tricky and keeping it in frame. And lighting is terrible. So, yeah, good on you. Yeah, good on you. Honestly, don't like sitting down for a lot of this because I never sat down when I did this. I used to stand up for a lot of it. So, old habits. But you really want to... I've got my knife nicely wedged in there and I'm paying close attention to how it's orientated so that I can actually just get my hand to just cut sort of automatically. But I need to stay on that line, which is really hard to keep in camera. Yeah, it'll do. You'll do better, won't you? You'll take your time and this is going to dull my knife because there's 2 tacks I've got to cut over. So I'm leaving them till the end of the cut. There we go. Killed that with a knife. Alright, so that's cut. Let's fix my knife. I don't know if you can see that, you probably can't. But that knife is absolutely shattered, which is why you buy cheap disposable snap-offs. So you can have a brand new, sharp as blazers knife. That fast, like seconds. Alright, so now we need to actually think about the form. And we're getting into cutting, so I'm going to get my cutting board out. And I'm just going to pull